Welcome everyone, I'm Doshon Farad. On this first edition of Worldwide, our roundtable will be discussing the issue of President Barack Obama and a black agenda. Is he doing enough for our community? But first, we'll be speaking with political commentator Roy Paul concerning issues of racial profiling, President Barack Obama, and this year's election. All that right now. Last week at the NAACP convention, Attorney General Eric Holder had spoke on the concept of racial profiling and police brutality. Recently, Commissioner Ray Kelly he asserted that black leaders are always speaking about or complaining about white people brutalizing black people, but never say anything whenever black people do it to each other. How would you respond to that?
Well, police brutality as a whole is an issue in New York in particular. The whole issue of stop and frisk has gotten out of control. Police Commissioner Ray Kelly has absolutely no business making that kind of remark because it's insensitive. It shows that he does not understand the needs of African Americans where they are in their communities. So when you make insensitive remarks, as Ray Kelly does, it makes it clear that someone like him shouldn't be the mayor of a diverse city like New York.
Now, when it comes to stop and frisk, do you feel that the Bloomberg administration is ignoring it, turning a blind eye to it, or do you feel that they're actively attempting to counter it?
Well, I don't understand why Mayor Bloomberg continues to defend a policy that clearly has not worked. When you disproportionately pull over as police officers a high rate of minorities, that's not a policy that works because there are certainly not minorities that singly make up the racial profiling in New York City. So when you have a race in New York City that gets targeted at an 80% rate of African Americans and brown people in the city, that's not a policy you defend. That's a policy you fix. That's a policy you alter. And what I don't understand is why there is such resistance on behalf of the commissioner and the mayor to at least readdress how the policy is working. It goes to a larger issue, Doshon, insensitivity. The mayor and the police commissioner have shown time and time again that they're insensitive to issues that are affecting the minority community. And I don't understand why there is this big push to have him go around speaking to African American churches about how this policy is working, as if it makes a difference. People in those churches, know that that policy does not work. They know that it disproportionately affects African American and Latino young people. And so the issue here is, why is there such resistance to fixing this issue? Why is there such resistance to the statistics that the police department themselves put out? That is, when individuals get stopped at an 80% rate or higher, young people in particular, but to a broader context, black and minority people get stopped more than whites. That's the issue.
Now, you saying that, I'm going to touch on what I first asked you. I've heard many people within the African American community say or reiterate what Ray Kelly said. Actually, Ray Kelly reiterated what many people within the African American community is stating concerning the black on black crime. When Trayvon Martin was killed, there were people who said that as outrageous as it was, why don't black people ever seem to get outrageous with the high number of black self-genocide taking place? How do you respond to that?
Well, there are two parts here. And the first part is, if you look at his comments in context, they're inappropriate because they do nothing to actually address the issue that we're talking about. The counterattack to police brutality and stop and frisk is not, let's talk about the black people who are killing black people. You were misplacing the concept of the dialogue here. The concept of that kind of discussion is to talk about how we fix the issue of stop and frisk and police brutality as a whole. We can have a separate conversation about black on black crime, and no one is going to tell you that it doesn't exist. See, that's the disconnect that we have as African Americans when we talk about the issue versus when Ray Kelly talks about the issue, because he would have you dilute What the issue is, stop and frisk and police brutality by trying to mix up black and black crime. The two and two, they don't go together, they don't mix. And so is there black on black crime? Absolutely. And the conversation does need to be had, as it is had. I don't think the African American shies away from that issue, about how do we fix the black on black crime. But when you interject that conversation into stop and frisk as a way of trying to defend this policy, that's what's wrong about it.
Now, you being a supporter of President Obama, I would say. Are you a supporter of President Obama?
I do support the president, yes.
Do you feel that his administration is doing enough to counter racial profiling and police brutality?
Well, no administration ever does enough. I think, depending on who you ask, someone will always say, I want the president to do more. I think the president is in a very difficult position because, and I'm not defending the fact that he has a lot on his plate, even though he does. I still think that there needs to be focuses on certain issues. But I think what we have to keep in mind here is that, and I only know this because I was once an elected official, you always go into an administration thinking, I have 10 things that I want to do. And by the end of your first term, or even your second or third, if you have the ability to do that, obviously the president doesn't, you never accomplish everything that you want to do. I think if you were to sit down and have an honest conversation with President Obama, he would tell you that there are things that he wanted to tackle that he didn't tackle, that he wished he had discovered. And that's an issue that every elected official has to tackle with. I think he also had to deal with the fact that he was trying to get bills passed through Congress with a very uncooperative Republican base. And that's not easy to do, and that does take a lot of time. So there's a question of whether or not he had time to tackle all of these issues. And to a larger extent, if you were to sit down and ask me, did he do everything that he can possibly do for African Americans? Of course not. So I don't like the unemployment rate with African Americans. I don't like the fact that we have this black on black crime and that there really is no federal funds coming into local communities targeting it. But at the same rate, when you look at in his totality what he has accomplished, I don't think that's to be pushed away to the side. That healthcare debate and that struggle was huge. The only African American president, the only president to do what he did with healthcare since 1912, that's huge. In our history, no one, starting in 2014, can say that they don't have health insurance.
Now speaking about health insurance, Mitt Romney had spoke recently at the NAACP convention last week. He was booed when he said that he would get rid of Obamacare. What is your take on Obamacare? Recently, the Supreme Court had to get involved in the fight, in the controversy, if you would, and they ruled that it was not unconstitutional, as people were saying last year and 2 years ago. You being a political commentator, you know, your ear is to the ground. How would Obamacare benefit Americans?
Well, I was extremely happy and surprised. I was happy because I did not think that it was going to come to fruition. I didn't think the Supreme Court would rule that it wasn't unconstitutional. I was surprised that Chief Justice Roberts was the deciding vote.
Most people were surprised at that.
All the Supreme Court justices that you would have thought of, I never thought that he would be the one to flip. But I think you have to understand that in a larger context, this bill, what it has essentially said, is that if you have a pre-existing condition, as many people do, you try to go get health insurance, and what do they say? We can't treat you. So there are people who walk into hospitals with cancer, and they leave dying of that cancer. President Obama had a very personal story. As we all know, his mother had a pre-existing condition, had to fight her health insurance company. We in this country take for granted so many different things that we have, to the point to where you have people who are suffering from ailments. You have young people walking around who can't find work, there are no opportunities, and they don't have health insurance. You scrape your foot on the floor, you have to find some home remedy. You have to go to the corner store, and it may not be the best remedy for your condition. So, and as powerful as we are, military-wise, diplomacy-wise, there are people who are walking around who are walking time bombs. They're dying, and they can't be treated. This bill, Obamacare, put a human face to what we're dealing with in this country. And I especially applaud it because of the provisions in it for young people. Because everyone says, you know, you're young, you're healthy, you're going to walk around and live until you're 85 years old. But that's not the case. And young people, I think we are facing it in all different ways because, I mean, you've got, you know, the sex trafficking that's happening across the country. You know, the African-American young boys who are, you know, providing the Hershey's, you know, chocolate for Hershey's. We've got, in our own state, private universities that are charging out the wazoo for tuition, making it virtually unaffordable for people to go to college. And to tackle that, on top of everything that you're dealing with, if your stomach is hurting, you can't get that treated. That's an issue, Doshon. It affects our psyche on so many different levels.
Now, how would you respond then to critics from the right who say that Obamacare is socialism?
Well, you're talking to me, so I'm not so sure that socialism is a bad thing.
Okay, well,
I think
it has been thrown out there because if you notice, many from the right, since the president has taken office, have accused him of being an undercover socialist.
Well, I'm not running for president of the United States. I think there's nothing wrong when you are saying that people should have decency in their lives. And so if that's socialism, then I guess I'm a socialist because I believe that everyone should have the access to quality health care. Everyone should have access to food if you're hungry. And if that means that the rich pay more than poor people, I'm all for it.
But how would you respond? Okay, when you speak about the rich people who can afford health care, you know, they'll tell you, well, look, you know, I spent all my life working hard to be able to afford health care. Why can't everyone else do it? How would you respond to that?
Well, you have to understand the reasons for which people start at the bottom. Not everyone who was born into this society, you know, I never heard of young people who, you know, are born and, you know, daddy's not in the picture, mommy is on welfare. You know, you don't ask to be in that situation. And so it is much easier for people who have access to wealth or who are wealth adjacent to say, I did it, why can't you? Because not everyone has the same opportunities. And that's what I was talking about earlier. You can't talk about achievement without opportunities. And until we get to an understanding of how people get opportunity, by you and I being the color that we are blocked out to opportunity. So there are racial factors, there are socioeconomic factors, and certainly there are some African Americans who started off with nothing and became successful, but that cannot be the case for everyone because the society is just not set up that way.
Now, many people would say that what you just ran was a bunch of excuses, specifically as it pertains
excuses
to
for who?
Our complexion. In other words, you're making it's the same old tired line, I'm a black man, the white man is trying to keep me from getting ahead.
Well, just because you have success doesn't mean you have money. And so I don't think I'm making excuses by saying that not everyone can be, you know, the same, have the same wealth as Bill Gates. I don't think that's making an excuse. Certainly people can be successful and people can rise above their circumstances. But when you're talking about the access to being able to afford some of these high cost premiums that they have out there with health insurance companies, you're talking about people who can obviously afford that. Just because you have a college degree and you may got your law degree from Harvard doesn't mean that you can afford some of the high cost premiums that are out there for health insurance. So, you know, not everyone can afford a $10 million home, even for the most successful of people. So I don't think I'm making excuses by saying not everyone can be wealthy.
Roy Paul, we thank you for joining us. Very brilliant. We appreciate
you and my mother are the only two people who think that.
Well, listen up. You have one more fan. We appreciate you joining us. Up next, our roundtable will be discussing President Barack Obama and a black agenda. Is he doing enough for our community? See you in a few minutes. Welcome to our roundtable. On this segment, we'll be discussing President Barack Obama and a black agenda. Is he doing enough for our community? We have joining us Veronica Kitt, who is the host of the VK News Hour. We also have with us Roy Paul, political commentator and radio show host. Well, as you know, last week the NAACP had their convention, and President Obama had respectfully declined. He had sent Vice President Biden in his place. Now, many people feel that President Obama has snuffed the NAACP. They said it wasn't a good move since he's still trying to retain the black vote. On the Wednesday during that convention on July 11th, Mitt Romney had spoke. And many people said it took courage, and he had actually said that he would be better for African Americans than President Obama. What I want to know is, one, is President Obama doing enough for the black community? And did you at all agree with Mitt Romney saying that he would be a better choice for African Americans? I want to start with you, Veronica. How do you assess the situation?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here on the show. My concern is the fact that they're actually negotiating us. It's like we're only used as a pawn when it's necessary to get the vote so that they can get back in office. Both of them, I mean, whoever's running for office. And so for Obama to snub the NAACP, that was unfortunate. When you think about the 95% of the black vote that supported Obama during his election in 2008, then why not? Why not be there? How come you did not show up? So it's a sign of disrespect, and or any black agenda for that matter. Any black institution that may need access to the president's policies, or he should be there.
Now, Roy, what's your take on it?
Well, Doshon, I too want to thank you for being on your show. You know that politics have gone awry when Mitt Romney says that he is better for African Americans than President Barack Obama to a room full of African American leaders from across the country. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark, clearly. We have someone who is African American, who has championed the cause of African American people, and I don't consider it a slight that he did not address the NAACP this year. Has he addressed the NAACP in the past? Of course he has. He's not anti-NAACP. When he put out that he was in favor of gay marriage, it was the NAACP that came out and issued a support letter on his behalf. So there is no bad blood between Barack Obama and the NAACP, nor with any other